What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. You're tuned into the Unfiltered Political Lens, where we cut through the headlines, the distractions, the media spin, and the scripted narratives to look at what's really happening behind the curtain. Tonight's episode is one of the biggest conversations we have ever had on this channel because we are diving deep into the hidden system of money, influence, artificial intelligence, corporate lobbying, and dark political networks, billionaire power, and information warfare that many experts say they quietly are reshaping the future of America itself. This isn't just another election story. This isn't just about Republicans or Democrats. This is about the machinery behind the systems, the influence structures most people never see, the financial pipelines, AI propaganda systems, lobbying ecosystems, and donor networks and corporate power structures that critics say are becoming deeply embedded in American democracy. And according to watchdog groups, campaign finance analysts, cybersecurity researchers, intelligence officials, and anti corruption organizations, the situation is evolving faster than most Americans realize. So tonight we're going all the way down the rabbit hole. We're talking about Citizens United, super PACs, dark money, billionaire donor concentration, astroturf campaigns, AI generated propaganda, and deepfakes, foreign influence operations, regulatory capture, big tech political power, and the growing fear that democracy itself may be slowly transforming into something unrecognizable beneath the surface. Now let's get into it. What I'm about to talk about goes far beyond Republican versus Democrats, left versus right, and one election cycle versus another. The deeper I dig into campaign finance records, lobbying disclosures, intelligence assessments, watchdog investigations, corporate influence operations, and AI driven political systems, the more it feels like America is entering a completely new era of power concentration. One where the influence itself has become industrialized, digitized, and increasingly hidden from the public's view. And the truth is that most Americans are still looking at politics through an outdated lens. People still imagine the corruption and the briefcases full of cash, secret phone calls, and smoke filled rooms, or politicians openly taking bribes. But the corruption experts are warning about the 2026 is something far more advanced. The modern corporations often operate legally, structurally, technologically, and psychologically. It is embedded into the architecture of its influence itself. When I look at the roots of this transformation, one moment stands out above almost everything else. The 2010 Supreme Court decision in Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission. That ruling fundamentally reshaped American elections by allowing the corporations, unions, and outside political groups to spend unlimited money independently in support of the candidates and causes. Supporters called it a victory for free speech. Critics called it the beginning of legalized oligarchic influence. Either way, the consequences have been massive since that ruling outside election spending has exploded into billions of super PACs, which became dominant political weapons. Nonprofit advocacy groups became financial pass-through systems. Political influence became increasingly detached from the transparent public accountability. And what most Americans don't realize is that the explosion of money after Citizens United didn't simply increase campaign advertising. It changed the entire structure of how influence flows through the political systems and campaigns, which are now deeply connected to enormous ecosystems of consultant data analysts, political technology firms, media strategists, polling operations, lobbying organizations, donor networks, and the algorithmic advertising systems. Elections are no longer just about the persuasion through speeches or debates. They are about behavioral influence at scale. Political operations now resemble intelligence campaigns mixed with the corporate marketing systems. When I examine the numbers, it is difficult to overstate the scale of the concentration that has developed. A tiny fraction of wealthy donors now wield extraordinary influence over American politics. Billionaires, hedge fund executives, tech investors, energy magnates, AI executives, Wall Street financiers, and corporate mega donors collectively inject billions of elections, policy organizations, and judicial races in this use of campaigns. Some watchdog organizations estimate that a shockingly small group of ultra wealthy families now account for a massive percentage of all the federal political contributions. That means the political system increasingly depends on a donor class with access levels ordinary Americans simply do not possess. And as this influence extends far beyond the campaign and the donations, wealthy political networks now fund the entire ecosystems of influence and infrastructure. They fund think tanks that shape policy proposals. They fund media organizations that shape narratives. They fund legal organizations that file strategic lawsuits. And they fund advocacy campaigns that pressure the lawmakers. They fund research institutions that produce reports favorable to specific industries or ideologies. They fund grassroots style campaigns designed to manufacture the public support. And because so much of this money flows through nonprofits and layered financial entities, the public often cannot trace where the influence actually originates. That's where the dark money enters the picture. The dark money refers to political spending where the true source of funding is hidden or obscured. While analysts warn the system has expanded dramatically in recent years, nonprofit shell organizations, trade associations, and pass through entities can channel enormous amounts of money into elections and policy battles without fully disclosing donors. What this creates is a political environment where the influence becomes increasingly anonymous to the public but highly visible to insiders. Politicians, strategists, and lobbyists may know exactly who funded major operations, while the ordinary voters remain in the dark. The critics will argue this creates a dangerous imbalance because politicians become privately dependent on the financials actors who are publicly invisible. In other words, the incentives driving policymaking may no longer align with the public's interest. They align with the donors' expectations in corporate partnerships, lobbying relationships, and political finance pipelines. Some of the analysts have described this as an auction politics, where the access and influence become increasingly tied to concentrated wealth rather than the democratic participation. And then there's the rise of the many experts calling astroturfing, which is the manufacturing of fake grassroots activism. This is one of the most sophisticated influence tactics operating within the modern America. Corporations and trade groups, lobbying firms, or wealthy donors fund the organizations that present themselves as independent citizen movements. To the average Americans, these campaigns look authentic. They also appear to be ordinary people organizing around local concerns. But the investigative reporting has repeatedly shown cases where corporate entities secretly finance the advocacy groups that are shaping public narratives while hiding their sponsorships. The utility companies have become a major focus in these investigations, and the analysts say the utility corporations possess enormous regional influence because they control the critical infrastructure and operate under complex regulatory systems that maintain close relationships with the lawmakers and the public utility commissions. Investigations have revealed cases where the utility linked networks allegedly fund issue campaigns and local election efforts, anti regulation initiatives, and anti public power messaging while concealing the corporate origins behind the advocacy. The result is that the communities may believe they are witnessing authentic public opinion when in reality, They are seeing the engineered narrative operations funded by the powerful economic interests. But you know what truly changes the equation in 2026 is artificial intelligence. AI has completely transformed the political information in the battlefield, and honestly, I think most people still underestimate how significant this shift is. The political propaganda is no longer limited by human labor. AI systems can now generate the massive quantities of persuasive content instantly. They also can create the fake news, articles, clone voice, synthetic video footage, and the automated political commentary. AI generated podcasts are also targeted with social media campaigns and emotionally optimized messaging tailored to specific audiences. Political persuasion itself is becoming algorithmically scalable. Now let's imagine what it means during elections. AI systems can study voter behavior and emotional triggers, online activity, and demographic data, and psychological tendencies at enormous scales. Then they generate the personalized political narratives designed to maximize persuasion, as well as outrage, fear, and loyalty. The different voters may receive entirely different realities and engineered specifically for them. One person sees economic fear messaging, another sees panic, another sees identity based outrage, another sees conspiracy driven distrust. The result is an increasingly fragmented informational environment where the citizens no longer share the same understanding of reality itself. Deepfake technology has also intensifies this danger even further, with AI generated voice can intimidate or in how do you say it? They can imitate the politicians or the journalists or celebrities or even the public figures with alarming realism. Synthetic videos can fabricate speeches, events, scandals, or crises, and experts warn that the future of elections may involve floods of deceptive media designed to manipulate the public's reaction before the fact checkers can even respond. And once trust collapses, the damage is already done. Even the legitimate information becomes suspect in a world flooded with synthetic manipulation. At the same time, the AI industry itself is becoming a major political force. AI companies, investors, and technology executives are rapidly expanding the lobbying operations and political funding networks. There are billions of dollars are now tied to the future regulation of the artificial intelligence, the automation, surveillance systems, the military AI applications, labor displacement policy, and copyright frameworks and data governance. That means the corporations developing these technologies are also increasingly influencing the political rules meant to govern them, and this raises enormous concerns about regulatory capture. Regulatory capture begins when industries gain the excessive influence over the agencies responsible for regulating them. Instead of regulators acting independently in the public interest, they gradually become aligned with corporate priorities. And sometimes this happens through lobbying pressure, sometimes through campaign donations, and sometimes through revolving door of employment systems where former regulators join industries they once oversaw, and corporate executives will move directly into government positions. The critics argue this pattern has already occurred in banking, pharmaceuticals, defense contracting, telecommunications, and energy. Now, many fear AI could become the next industry to dominate its own oversight structure before any meaningful safeguards are established. And then there's foreign influence warfare, which intelligence agencies continue warning about aggressively. Russia, China, Iran, and other adversarial states are no longer relying solely on traditional espionage methods. Information warfare has become central to geopolitical strategy. Foreign influence operations increasingly focus on exploiting social division inside the United States. These campaigns use fake accounts, AI generated content, bot amplification systems, hacked materials, and covert media partnerships, and emotionally divisive narratives designed to weaken public trust and intensify polarization. What is important to understand is that the goal often isn't simply getting Americans to support one candidate over another. The broader objective is destabilization. It's making Americans distrust elections, distrust institutions, distrust journalism, distrust science, distrust law enforcement, distrust each other, and ultimately distrust the possibility of an objective truth itself. If enough confusion and cynicism spread, democratic systems become easier to fracture from within. And I think this is where the real danger emerges. Corruption in modern democracies is becoming less visible, but more structurally embedded, and it doesn't always look criminal because many forms of influence have been normalized legally and culturally. The system adapts around concentrated power instead of resisting it. Billionaire influence becomes expected, and lobbying becomes institutionalized. Data surveillance becomes routine, and algorithmic manipulation becomes profitable. The media ecosystems become polarized engagement machines, and citizens gradually lose the visibility into who actually shapes public policy. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans often feel increasingly disconnected from the decisions making people vote, but many feel their economic conditions don't improve. The public's trust declines, cynicism rises, political anger grows, and into the distrust enters even more propaganda and even more outrage content, even more manipulation. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle where emotional division itself becomes profitable for political operators, media ecosystem, and algorithmic-driven platforms. What worries many anti-corruption analysts is that democratic systems can slowly hollow out while maintaining the appearance of democratic process on the surface. Elections still happen, campaigns still run, and debates still occur. But underneath the power increasingly flows through invisible financial networks, technological infrastructure, data operations, lobbying ecosystems, and donor dependencies that most citizens never directly see. The public experience politics as spectacle with real influence and concentrates behind the layers of legal and technological complexity. And if America fails to recognize how rapidly this environment is evolving, the consequences could become permanent. Because once systems of concentrated influence fully integrate with AI-driven persuasion, surveillance capitalism, and opaque financial networks, reversing those structures becomes exceptionally more difficult. Future elections may not simply contest between candidates, they may become the contest between competing influence architecture powered by billion-dollar funding systems, predictive algorithms, psychological targeting models, as well as information warfare operations. That's why this conversation matters, and this isn't conspiracy theory territory. These are the concerns being raised by campaign finance researchers, intelligence analysts, anti-corruption watchdogs, cybersecurity experts, election monitors, democracy scholars, and even former government officials. The central warning is becoming increasingly clear that the modern democracies are entering an era where corruption is evolving from the isolated criminal acts into technological sophisticated systems of structural influence embedded directly into the machinery or governance itself. And if citizens don't begin understanding how these systems operate, how many shape narratives, how algorithms shape the emotions, how donors networks shape policy, and how invisible influence structures shape perception, then democratic accountability may slowly become more symbolic than the real. The greatest threat may not be one scandal, one politician, or one corporation, or one foreign actor. The greatest threat may be a future where the public can no longer distinguish the authentic democratic choice from engineered political reality. So that's the question I want to leave everybody with tonight. Are we still living in a system where voters truly control the future or the country, or are we entering an era where the invisible networks of money, data, artificial intelligence, corporate influence, and engineered perception are increasingly shape our reality before the public even realizes it's happening? Because the deeper you look into modern politics, the more you realize this isn't just about the elections anymore. It's about the information and control. It's about the psychological influence. It's about the digital power, and it's about who controls the narratives, the algorithms, and the funding pipelines, and ultimately the direction of society itself. And regardless of the political affiliation, every American should be paying attention to where this is heading. If you made it all the way through this episode, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel and share this video, because these conversations the mainstream media often only scratches the surface of. Please drop your thoughts down in the comments below, because I want to know what you think. Are these systems becoming too powerful? Is democracy adapting or being quietly transformed in real time? Thank you for tuning in to the Unfiltered Political Lens. For more updates, deep dives, and investigations which are coming, and we're going to keep following the money, the influence, and the hidden systems shaping the modern world. Until next time, stay informed and stay critical, and keep questioning everything. Peace.